Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast is on the air. Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining me again this week. I'm still kind of blown away that we are in our 6th season of this podcast, entering our 6th year of weekly episodes. And that's all thanks to you, our listeners, because you continue to tell us what you want to hear about, and more importantly, how you benefit from the topics we cover and the content we share. So thanks to all of you for sticking with us over the years. We know that there are a lot of podcasts out there that you can choose from, and we're really just honored that you join us every week and allow us into your homes, your offices, and even on your drive to work. So thank you. We appreciate it. We're very grateful. So for today, I want to build on a theme that Diwakar and I discussed in our 2026 kickoff episode last week, and that's getting and staying well prepared for the year ahead of these positive changes we're seeing and expecting in the economy. Now, new year, new you, like we all like to say with the new year. And this new you has a plan for tremendous growth, and we're here to help with that. And we want to talk about how being prepared and really ready looks for you. However, I don't want to talk about that in passive terms. Like, what should I be thinking about? Because if you think too long on it, you're not going to act on it. And because we know that you all want to lead the way in the new year as owners and not stall out by that thinking stage, obviously it's important to ponder and reflect and know what you want, but it's also imperative that you act if you want to experience the growth that you desire, the increase in value of your business in a meaningful way. So we'll frame the conversation in a what do I need to do and when, and even more importantly, in a why format. And since we already covered what to expect in terms of the economy in 2026 and how you can take advantage of that, for today's episode, we'll shift gears a little bit and take a look at how you can increase the value of your practices with incentive programs and retention of, the rock stars that you've already got in your practices or maybe need to recruit. And even more importantly, how to go about that. And who better to walk us through the inner workings of retention, incentive programs, and partnership opportunities is my teammate, Mark Flock, Polaris Partnership and Equity Solutions Executive, who helps our clients build and then roll out just these types of programs. So Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for the invite, Jamie.
Well, good. Are you, you're through the holidays here. We're back well into 2026. Are you ready to go? What's exciting for you?
There's not really much of a choice, so yes, I'm ready to go.
So you survived the holidays. Good.
Yes,
I did
absolutely.
too. I'm going to pause and give a big shout out to Dr. Wachter at Elevation Dental, because I was a lucky recipient of a root canal for Christmas this year. So I'm also glad to be into 2026 and have that behind me.
I was dealing with wrapping up partnerships right at the end of the year, not dealing with root canals. So I guess either way, it was a positive for both of us. Just we got through it.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we kick off with, keeping that theme of partnerships, some of the conversations around ownership and partnership and like the questions that someone might want to ask themselves if they're going to consider this for 2026, and maybe things that they need to ask themselves around what they'll do differently in 2026. We want to stay on that let's take action theme, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, new year, new agenda type of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of new changes that's happened in 2025, rolling into 2026. I mean, the first thing asking is, what will you change? I mean, if you're keeping it this, if you're staying on the track of doing the same thing, with it even working really, really well, that's great. But what are you doing differently to kind of catapult your business to the next stage, wherever that may be, wherever you want to be in 3 years from now? You got to start now. The sooner you start, the more impact you'll have 2 or 3 years from now. No different than anything else in life. The sooner you start, the more impactful it'll be. So I think a lot of doctors are asking themselves, how do I get to that next stage? Partnership could be one of those things. Like I said, yes, I'm the partnership person for Polaris, but I am not an advocate for you must have partners in order to succeed type of thing. It
No,
may not
definitely
be,
not
yeah,
a
it may
one
not be
size
the
fits
right,
all.
it may not be the right thing for you. And I've talked to a lot of doctors and clients that have come my way out of creating a partnership solution in some cases because it doesn't make sense. They're not at the right point. They haven't reflected enough on what they truly want and where they want to be. Bringing in a partner is just going to mess everything up. And potentially in that situation. So you got to know where you're going. You got to know what you're expecting, your vision, where you want to be, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And partners could be a critical aspect of doing so. So
Yeah.
if you're stagnant in growth and you're growing and say you have a handful of locations, well, and if you don't have a partnership solution, if you're not asking the conversation with these doctors and asking what they want, that could be the catalyst. You just don't know yet. And there's a lot of questions to ask in order to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that. Let's stay active in what we're doing, really be ready. If you're not now, then let's get there. But let's move beyond the I'm just thinking about this stage and really get some tools to figure out if you are, and if you are, how do you go about that? So with that, I kind of want to rewind a little bit and talk about some foundational things with the practice. Maybe you are not considering this, but that all ties into what are you looking to build and why?
Yeah,
So why is that important for docs to ask themselves?
It's a huge question. And a lot of times, most doctors don't know exactly what they are looking to build. I think the why is more important than the what. As always, when I'm looking at situations, it's like, you want to do this, but why do you want to do that? And because the why tells me what you're thinking, what you're really trying to accomplish versus saying, I want to hit $10 million in revenue, if I have 1 or 2 locations right now. Well, okay, well, why do you want to hit $10 million in revenue? That tells me everything. So understanding what you're looking to build and why is extremely important for many different reasons. Creating a partnership solution could be what's needed in order to get you to that stage, whatever it is. If you're looking to build something to exit and you haven't planned for the interim as well as the exit aspect, then you might be creating something that doesn't make sense, for you, for your doctors as your providers, or by not offering something could constantly create a revolving door. And that's never going to get you to that $10 million number as an example. So there's a lot of things that go into that question, but that tells me where we should start talking about partnership, if at all, depending on how you answer that. And we dig deep into that question. Yeah.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, and I'll run down this hypothetical. So what if I am the doctor that comes to you and says, I'm looking for $10 million in revenue. What do I need to do, Mark?
Depends on where you are right now, and depends how fast you want to get there. Depends how many providers you may or may not need to get there. And it kind of depends on once you get to 10 million, what's next? And are you going to be adding locations? Are you going to be creating a de novo, or did you just have a build out and you went from 10 ops to 20 ops? So, and you're bringing in 2 new doctors. So there's a lot of things that, once again, just because you answer the 10 part, there's a lot of things you kind of have to like pull back the onion and get farther down and say, okay, you're adding 2 providers. These providers must be doing $2 million each in collections. Today, they might only be doing $1 million. Let's just say, how can we get them to $2 million providers? So there's a lot of ways, you can talk about that. You can incentivize them, either through an equity situation. You need to talk about continuing education, and are we outsourcing or referring out a lot of services that we can keep in-house if we're a general dentistry type of practice or GP office? Are these providers able to keep things more in-house? Are they motivated even by equity at the end of the day? And then are they, do they need to improve on their potential skill set? They might only be a year or 2 out of school. So, okay, I view that as a huge runway versus someone who might be, looking to retire in the next year or 2. They're probably not looking to jump up a whole lot. Could be wrong. Once again, there's no wrong answer there. It just depends on those individuals. But what do you want out of them and why? And where do you expect them to be? And you might need to bring them in and provide some coaching, in order to do that. So if you're doing, say, $3 million, $2 or $3 million, how can they become more like you? And you also have to realize that as an associate, think about it, as an employee in the business, you can't necessarily expect them to be just like you because you're motivated differently. You're an owner.
Yes.
You've invested all this money. You've been working probably longer than they have. You've been in the business for say 10 years and they're coming into the business. You can't expect them to be you tomorrow, but how can you get them to be more like you tomorrow? And an aligned partner could be that motivation for
Yeah.
them if they're aligned with the same vision and mission of that you're looking at getting the business, which could be 10 million, could be whatever that number is, and that they may want to be part of that journey.
Yeah, and you touched on a couple really important things there, considering next week is our doctor development program in Charlotte. But doctor development in and of itself, like you've got to have partners coming in that have a growth mindset. They want to develop their skills. They want to increase their production. And if you're going to give them some skin in the game, or they're going to buy some skin in the game, I should say, depending on whether it's a buy-in or earn-in, this has to be the right person for your business. And I've got to be the right kind of owner too. What do you come across with owners in terms of control? Like, I built this business. Let's say I've got 3 locations. I'm looking to add, 2 in the next 18 months. Do you find that a lot of owners have concerns around control, and how do you address that?
I would say 90% plus, Jamie.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. Most doctors, or I guess owners today that are 100% owners, one of their biggest concerns, it's not just the financial aspect.
Mm.
It's well, I'm giving up control by bringing in a partner into my business. And that concerns me because I've been the one making the decisions for the last 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, whatever that may be. And now I'm bringing in a partner that's going to potentially slow things down or not be aligned with what my decisions are and cause an issue there. No different than a marriage. In some cases, there's a lot of positives, but there also could be some negatives if it's not the right person. I hate to say,
Yeah.
just calling a spade a spade. So
Yes.
it's that alignment, though, no different than a marriage or relationship or anything else within a partnership, is kind of similar in the business sense. And a lot of doctors may not see that. So if I'm not as much of a huge fan, to be brutally honest, of having 50-50 partnerships for that very reason. You've taken on the risk as an owner, and you've put the money down to do so. You've built it to where it is today. You've created the structure that's allowed it to be successful over the years. And then someone's coming in, at the ninth hour, not the 11th hour by any means, but coming in and hopping on at that opportunity. So it just kind of depends. If you're growing a group practice, there's many, many ways, Jamie, of alleviating the concern for control. And there's a lot of different factors. I mean, within a operating agreement, those are well defined. And
Mhm.
I work with attorneys, I work with the principal owners, and to make sure it's reasonable and fair for both sides, meaning the current owner who's allowing a partnership opportunity, as well as the soon-to-be partner that's coming in, because there's ways of creating earned equity solutions, and I know you've heard it on our podcast many, many times, through the form of RSUs or restricted stock units or profits interest units or PIUs, where they may or may not come with voting rights, and a lot of times, even if they do come with voting rights, it may be a smaller percentage. So there's ways where you can still be the managing member, as they put in an operating agreement, if it's an LLC, where you can still call the day-to-day shots, in most cases.
Yeah.
There's also what they call supermajority decision-making, some of the bigger decision-making factors, like, taking on more loans, or maybe selling the business, or certain, it's always defined in the operating agreement that you can really control out, and there's a percentage associated with that. You may want to stay in that percentage so you can control that aspect. So once again, it's very customizable when you're doing it. But if you come to me and say, hey, I've promised this doctor 50-50 partnership, it's black and white. There's not as much I can do about that. So once again,
Yeah.
being proactive and kind of understanding your plan, what you're looking to build and why, and then creating that plan where it makes sense for all aspects that you're concerned about, is something we can do when it's proactive. When it's reactive or after the fact, I'm very limited in the options, but there's still always options, just to be clear. So I don't know if that answered your question, Jamie. Yeah.
It does. And I'll double down on something. The point we're trying to make here to you, our listeners, is get your operating agreement in place. Structure it the right way from the beginning. Back in December, for those of you that caught my episode with Sarah Stock, founder of Stock Legal, we talk about this very thing. And Mark knows her well. We all work together here for the betterment of these situations. We want to make sure that our clients and their businesses are structured the right way from the beginning so that you're not untangling this rat's nest of your organization when you do decide that you want to do something down the road, or maybe you feel you've made a mistake, right? Every marriage runs that risk of divorce. I hate to put it that way. So you've got to protect yourself in those situations and really protect not only your business, but your ability to make decisions as well, and still be fair. Equity solutions, like you've brought up a number of times, this is not a cut and dry one size fits all. It's a negotiation. If you've got a valued partner that you want to add to your business, someone who's a great producer, a great fit culturally for your practice, everybody needs to be happy here in this negotiation, right? It's not a, here's what I've got, I'm only doing it this way. It should be a conversation. So structuring that the right way from the beginning, like I said, I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, it's got to make sense. And this is what I tell clients, and sometimes have to push them in certain directions that they may not feel comfortable initially, is it's got to make sense from both sides. I mean, like I said,
Yes.
it's very much a partnership. So if
Mhm.
you're feeling like you've won or you've felt that you've lost in a situation going into the partnership, like
Yeah,
take that perspective, take that side and go on their perspective. If you feel like you've won, that means they probably feel like they've lost in this. So
exactly.
they're going to feel that. They're going to potentially have resentment, and they're potentially not going to be as strong of a partner as you wish going into it. So it's got to make sense for both sides. There may be there's absolutely some give and take, some push
Mhm.
and pull, 100%. And that's kind of the part of at least allowing us, I work with a lot of different amazing attorneys and go through this process every time, and
Yeah.
making sure this operating agreement is set up, because that's really just a partnership agreement, what works when, how this works, if then this, and everything's spelled out there. Or sometimes it might be a little vague because we know there's going to be some changes going on in the future, and allow
Mhm.
some opportunity for some changes to be made. So it's want to make sure it's fair from all angles, because if it's not, there's going to be issues, and it just needs to make sense. Now, it
Yeah.
might be weighted for the current principal owner, because once again, they're taking on the risk, especially if it's an earned equity situation. They're giving away equity at no cost. They're not getting compensated for it financially. So there might be some extra things in there for that. But once again, the new partner that's coming in has a great opportunity where they can become a partner in the business, have equity, something of value, but not have to pay for it on the front end. So
Yeah.
it's there's, once again, that's where we kind of come in and craft it from a business perspective, because attorneys are amazing. They look at the legal aspects. It's a legal document. Everything's crafted, but there might be some things that, hey, 3 years down the road, this might not make sense from a business lens based on what you told me on what you're looking to build and why.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of take a look at that and say, look, 5, 6, 7 years out, will this still be a good document then? And there's certain things we kind of want to take a look at, and it may not always be perfect, but try to at least capture as much as we can.
Yeah. On that note, I want to ask you, so maybe we've had that conversation and I'm going to wave the white flag and make my exit here in a couple of years. Why is that an important consideration as an owner if I'm offering partnership?
Yeah, it's really important, because just from a transition, if you think about it from a buyer's lens, if they're a third party or an external, it doesn't have to be an external buyer, but if it is, let's just say it's another strategic DSO or private equity firm, and that's where a
Yeah.
lot of group practices eventually exit or have a partner. It's not really truly exiting, because you're just bringing on a partner to kind of work with for the next however many years, however that's defined, and it could be a very positive partnership for you as well with that new sponsor or partner. So at that point, you think about it, if you have 6 partners and there's your key providers, well, that provides a pretty smooth transition, for that buyer. I have 6 partners that are coming along. They're all benefiting from this. They have equity, and they're going to have some skin in the game now and potentially in the future, with, a cash out now and maybe a cash out when the equity turns 3, 5, 7 years down the road, whatever that time period is, when there's a recap. So it's nice to have that. The buyer sees that as a positive, because it's a smoother transition for them. If there's no partners in the business, and say you've built a business that's doing 20, $30 million in revenue, which is great, maybe difficult to get there without partners, but not impossible, probably very difficult, but not impossible. And then you
Mhm.
try to transact. Well, you might have some providers that are, maybe not interested in renewing an employment contract. There's not as much of a incentive to do so because they're not partners in getting an equity payout. That could be a questionable transition for your buyer. They may or may not offer as much. They still may very much want your business and say, this is a great business, we want to be a part of that, but it may not be valued as highly because there's some transitional risk, associated with that. Because if you have, 6 $2 million providers and, 4 of them say, yeah, I want to continue working. Well, okay, what's $4 million less in revenue you potentially have without those 2 providers that are not going to stay? But if you have all 6, this is a great deal for your buyer. Everyone's staying on, we're moving forward. It's smooth. It's probably quicker, a little more seamless. And they can all benefit from that too. So not to get too far in the weeds, a lot of what ifs, but yes. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. And it's not just seamless for the buyer. It's at the end of the day, how does the patient see your practice? The last thing they want to see is new faces when they come in, when your practice has changed hands or your group. Some familiar faces. I want to see the doc that I'm seeing. I don't want to see somebody new every time. There's a comfort level there that people don't want to lose, and that's got great value for your business. And I want to ask you.
Important. It's also important for I would say the selling doctor, not to get back, because to your point, you have most likely rolling equity if it's an external buyer too as well.
Yeah.
Rolling equity, and if your equity is at risk because you haven't, locked up to the provider, not say locked up, but more of just had those providers that are coming along for the journey as well, that are all interested and excited to do the same thing as you are, then that allows for you all to hopefully have an increase in that value of your equity that you're rolling over. So, and no different, not to take a step back, Jamie, we see a lot of doctor to doctor transitions when doctors are looking to exit. So I don't want to discount that because we didn't really talk about that, but having partners in your business, let's just say, even if you're looking to exit in say 10 years, retire, throw in the towel 10 years from now, and you don't want to sell externally, to a private equity firm. I hear that a lot. That's perfectly fine. We can help assist, what that may look like. But having, say, 2 or 3 or even 4 to 6 doctors that may have 5%, 6%, even if it's small percentages, think about it. When they go to transact and get a loan for what you're looking to sell, and let's just say it's $20 million at that point in time, they may only need a loan for 14. Because they were partners growing equity. They bought in. It might have been buy-ins along the way, in the process. There's no wrong answer. Once again, it goes back to what you're looking to build and why and how you look to exit, all that stuff. So so that way, going to a bank and taking out a loan for say $14 million between 6 individuals that are already working in the business and are already partners in the business is a much easier potential for a bank to say yes, or even financial institution, than to say, hey, we will all want to come together. We're not partners today, and we want $20 million on a $20 million business. Well, that's a little bit riskier from an investment perspective from the banking or financial institutions. When you already have partners, it's an easier transition for you to exit as well. If you're the principal owner that holds the majority of ownership, it's easier for your doctors that are minority partners to buy you out too as well and transition you out. Once again, the partnership could be your answer. It doesn't have to be, but that's another route that you could easily go, that if you think of it from a lending perspective, moves things out a little bit too.
Yeah. Good point there. I don't want to spend too much time on talking about the transition side of this, but you mentioned something about, well, if you don't want to sell to private equity, you don't have to. And that is certainly true. 100% agree with you. And we would just ask that you understand why you don't want to do that. Eliminating any aspect of who you might sell to needs to have a why behind it, because they're all so different. Every DSO, every private equity firm, they're all very different. So please make sure you know why you don't want to sell to someone before you don't sell to them. Because there could be a great opportunity that you're missing there just based on principle, or maybe not having the full picture. So I'm off my soapbox on that. But
that's very true, Jamie. And that's sometimes I see that often shift. I have clients that come and say, I will never sell to an external third party, like a strategic DSO or a private equity firm, things like that. And then 2 years later, they're looking, hey, 2 or 3 years from now, I'd rather go that route, for XYZ reasons, and vice versa. Someone's like, what, I'm kind of questioning that aspect here and there. So me personally, based on what I'm looking at, I just rather would sell internally to my doctors. Understandably, you're most likely not going to get the same type of economic outcome from that, just to be clear, selling internally versus externally, but that's always an option. Like you have options. It's just there's
Exactly.
different routes for each option potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Keep an open mind, consider all your avenues. Just important to know why you're choosing what you're choosing. Just as
Yep.
important as it is on why you're looking to build what you're looking to build. So
Yep.
before I ask you about just a real quick high level overview of types of equity and incentive, I want to ask you really quickly about bonus plans. What if I'm not okay giving up ownership? It's not for me. I need to have 100% control. Could I offer a bonus plan, and why or why not? Or let me rephrase that. Is it a good idea or isn't it? Depending
Yeah. Great question, Jamie. And I get asked that often too as well. I mean, there's a lot of different compensation or bonus incentives. There's things called phantom equity out there. And there's things that you could just have a annual bonus plan based on profit sharing. Your profit sharing plans a lot of times. You can absolutely do that. This is where I'll kind of just go my personal opinion on that. So, and I'm not going to speak for everyone out there as the gospel for everything type of thing. But when it comes to like a profit sharing plan, I think they can work great, especially with more of maybe your administrative staff. If you have like maybe even a corporate type of staff, or maybe even hygienists, assistants, things like that. I think equity plans are more impactful for your providers or your doctors.
meaning doctors, yeah.
Doctors, yes. And they may not necessarily disagree with me, but let me take a step back and explain why. Your administrative people typically cannot affect how much your doctors can produce. And if your doctors are producing 2 million versus 1.5, that's kind of on them and their capabilities and what they're able to do and what they're able to keep in house and what, a lot of different things, but that's more doctor driven. I'd rather incentivize the doctors with equity that allows for retention that could also be more impactful long term. So you're creating a retention aspect. You're also creating something that's more valuable than a profit sharing plan would otherwise be if the business grows and they perform really, really well. So I want to give them the credit for that and incentivize them for doing so.
Sure.
If you have like a profit sharing plan, that's great. But like I said, the people that maybe have less of an impact, it's more like operational. They're one of 20, one of 30 potentially. I'd be more inclined to give them a profit sharing plan based on the business of what they're doing, more of incentivize them locally if it's location based or maybe it's a little bit group level. But the one thing I don't like about the profit sharing or just certain incentives, depending on how it is because once it's paid out, if it's annual, you might pay it out in January, February, March of the following year. Once they get that check, if it's a big check, for whatever reasons, it could be, Jamie, thank you for the past year. I got my nice check, sayonara, type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Whereas if it was equity and then there was like a vesting schedule associated with it, they could also do that, but they'd be walking away from a good chunk of that. And so that's where it's like, we do create some incentive plans for the non-providers as well when we're working with consulting clients. And I've done that a handful of times where it's based on performance, and the performance does this, we give out a chunk of that and to these individuals. So it's not to shy away from that. It's just different plan for different group of employees is how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's my
those
personal
pieces
opinion.
are critical. I mean, we really drive home operational success, not only on this podcast, but with what we deliver as a company. Like, we're looking to help you streamline. We want the rest of the employees that are not license holding providers, I'll get really specific, meaning doctors, know that staff might not directly impact what they produce, but they can influence it with the streamlining of operations, right? So I think it's a good idea to make sure those people are taken care of, but that's a really personal decision and a discussion with you, of course, to see how that would play out for your individual business, because they do play a role, even though they're not a doctor in producing that themselves. But yeah, thank you for that, because I know that's a question we get kind of frequently.
One thing to kind of note on the profit sharing piece, or the more of that, is some staff, unfortunately, and I get both sides of it, get accustomed to receiving their bonus on an annual basis or whatever it is. So if for whatever reasons the business does not perform as planned or exceed the metrics in order to pay out that bonus, they're often upset they may not understand why, but
Yeah.
they sometimes will have an expectation. Well, I received $5,000 last year. Why am I not getting one this year? So it's a conversation.
Well,
So once again, it's very much it's performance based. So you want to
yeah.
make sure your staff and your team isn't under the impression that it's expected, it's guaranteed, it's always the case, because just like anything else, profitability in 2026 is not guaranteed for your practice, unfortunately. So you have to perform, you have to do well, you have to, run a good business and increase your revenues and look at your profitability or EBITDA in order for that to be the
Mhm.
case and you to have a business of value. So in order to do that, they need to understand it goes the same way when you have a profit sharing kind of aspect of, if we don't have profits, I have nothing to share. It's not coming out of my pocket. And I've had owners where
Right.
they're taking it out of their pocket and then they're complaining about their own income, rightfully so, because people are expecting it. So I don't want to go too far on that soapbox, but I've seen that many, many times with consulting clients too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you would hope that if profit sharing is something that you offer, or that you use as incentive, that there's a level of transparency so that
hmm
these employees know how profitable you are and can manage their expectations around that bonus. Because some years might be great, but people might have had a couple of struggle years,
hmm
especially during the pandemic and things like that. So, they have to understand that it does fluctuate. And if they don't, boy, you got to really level set expectations. But yes, we were going off on a tangent there, but thank you for covering that. Before we wrap up, can you just give our listeners, for those that maybe haven't caught your previous episodes, maybe just a brief high-level overview of the types of equity and how they can be used to incentivize provider doctors, going through the short list of them. Obviously, you can't cover every
Yeah,
single scenario. We'd be here for hours.
yeah, I would first off, I'd recommend going back and listening to the podcast that we had in 2025, because it was two or three of them that we had where we list out,
At
went through
least.
detail for buy-ins, restricted stock units, profits interest units. I also actually have some documents, some PDFs, if you're a listener today and would like to kind of take a look at what those three options I just mentioned, kind of with the pros and cons and where it goes, feel free to reach out to me directly. I can
Mhm.
always send you a copy of that PDF. It's very high level. If you're considering this, this may make more sense, but let's have a conversation. It's how I always handle that one. So reach out to us, reach out to me, send us a message. I can send you that. That'll probably be a little more conversational for us to hop before we hop on a call. But really,
Yeah.
buy-ins, that's probably the most common one everyone knows about. So, strategic buy-in, I look at it, it's sometimes as, low as 0.5% or 1%, and it can be as high as what you want it to be for that matter. And
Less
and we
than
kind of
50.
less than 50, but I mean, it's if it needs to be 50 and that's what you're adamant on, we'll talk through and kind of have that conversation.
Mm-mm.
And once again, that means the operating agreement to our conversation earlier is all that much more important in a situation like that. So we'll kind
Mhm.
of talk through that. We'll evaluate things, and that's part of the process of what we provide, is that business lens of what you need to consider, and not just the legal and financial aspect, which are two very important pieces. But, how will this work? Especially, like I mentioned, alignment earlier with your vision
Mhm.
and having that partner with a buy-in, and especially if it's a high percentage buy-in, that alignment is even more important, even more so. So once again, we
Yeah.
talked through all those things. I did a lot of buy-ins in 2025. I expect to do them probably in 2026 as well. Yep, like I said, we'll talk through the buy-in piece. As far as the other options that we look at, we consider a lot of RSUs, or restrictive stock units. Those work really
Mhm.
well if you have a very large business that will continue to grow, or you're looking at offering equity at a group level. You may not have a management company or a DSO structure set up today, but that's something we can look to evaluate and talk through with clients. Does that make sense? May not always
Mhm.
be the case. We're not advocates to, you must set up a DSO structure in order to do this. If that's something that doesn't make sense for you and your business, we can look at other options. And
Sure.
that incentivizes doctors individually based on their performance. And there's a lot of pros when it comes to the RSU aspect when you have a bigger organization continue to grow. And then profits interest units work really well if you have businesses that are looking to grow again. Once again, must be growing. And you want to incentivize someone, if it's practice level equity, it works really well in de novos, and putting an anchor doctor at a location and then allowing that anchor doctor to have ownership in that location and help push it forward from a growth perspective. Don't want to get too far in the weeds on how that operates versus restrictive stock units. Both of them are earned
cart
equity
before the horse.
solutions. Yeah, both of them are earned equity solutions. And I'll go into a conversation where they're considering one, and we actually leave and present the other to their team. And there's no wrong. And by doing so, it just ends up making more sense once I understand their structure, once I understand how they're looking to motivate the doctors, who they're looking to motivate, and once again, what they're looking to build and when they're looking to build it by. That all kind of plays a factor on what makes more sense for your business, on why you would offer one or the other. So that's kind of it at a high level. Yeah.
And it goes back to that question that we talked about at the beginning of the show. What are you looking to build and why? These are foundational questions before we even get to the type of equity or type of incentive or type of bonus, whatever it's going to be. Have a conversation, figure it out, and then let's put the pieces in place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sorry, we lost our cameras here, technical difficulties, but you can still hear us. So Mark, it's always great to have you on the show. I know our listeners really enjoy hearing from you. And, these conversations around retention and even recruitment and offering these types of things and considering why you would do that are really critical to the value of the business. Like, you need to know why you want to do something and then figure out what you're going to do and maybe stop thinking about it so much. Let's take some action, make the phone call, and start with a conversation. Doesn't have to be complicated.
Yep. And that's what we're here for, is taking something that can seem extremely complicated and simplifying it and helping you create a solution for you and your team that makes sense for where you want to be in the next couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. And to our audience, we really appreciate that you support us by subscribing to the podcast. And we love the questions that you send us. So keep them coming, and we'll keep delivering the content that you ask us for. As always, if you'd like to learn about any of our Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic that we haven't covered that you want to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can reach us by visiting our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Go up to that Contact Us button, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague and be sure to leave us a rating on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.